Alright, so as a review, remember, clauses always have a subject and a verb. There are two flavors of clauses. The first one is independent. Remember, again, they have a subject and a verb, and they always make sense. So when you read them, they'll be clear. The second kind of clause is a subordinate clause. Again, they do have a subject and a verb, but these are the ones that do not make sense. If you remember back to our clauses lessons, we learned that there were adjective clauses that always begin with relative pronouns, that, which, whose, who, and whom. And then there are adverb clauses that begin with the white bus. To find these subordinate clauses, of course, you looked for the clue words and you were able to identify them. Now, when we do sentences, you're going to have to know independents and subordinates, because sentences are created based on these kinds of clauses. It might be one of them, it might be a couple of them, it could be two of these or two of these. But we're going to look at the kinds of sentences today. So the first kind of sentence we're going to look at are simple sentences. These are sentences that have one independent clause. They won't have any subordinate clauses in them at all. Look at these examples with me. The students went to the ocean. The students, there's your subject. Went is your verb. Notice there are no clue words beginning a subordinate clause later on or earlier in the sentence. This is an example of a simple sentence. Look at this next one. Jeremy and Tommy went to the ocean. Has a double subject here, still no subordinate clause in it, making it a simple sentence. And then finally, Jeremy and Tommy swam and played at the ocean. There's a prepositional phrase right here, at the ocean, but again, this sentence has no subordinate clauses in it. Nothing to circle, underline, or draw an arrow to. You can't cut those simple sentences in half. Both parts would make sense if we separated them. So if we look at this, Tommy and Jeremy swam, well, that makes sense, but and played doesn't make sense alone. Therefore, we can't split that sentence up. That's a pretty good indication that it's a simple sentence. Same thing with this one. The students went. Well, that works, but the second half of it, to the mall, can't stand alone. So the students went to the mall. Simple sentence. Just a few more examples here. You may have some of these in your foldable. Leaves and branches lay beneath the trees in our front yard and blocked the driveway. If I look through this sentence, I don't see any from the wish list, and I don't see any from the white bus. Simple sentence. Jill and Erica campaigned energetically and raised the funds. Again, I've got two subjects there. I've got my verb, so it is a clause, but that's just one independent clause. No clue words indicating a subordinate clause. This month's school newspaper includes a list of new books in the library. Got several prepositional phrases there, but again, no clue words starting a subordinate clause. So this is one big independent clause, making it a simple sentence. Simple sentences are only one independent clause. Okay, our second kind of sentence are compound sentences. A compound sentence, and in your foldable you recorded this, has two or more independent clauses. There will be absolutely no subordinate clauses. So you're not going to see those clue words starting subordinate clauses in these sentences. However, in a compound sentence, you will always find a comma with a fanboy or conjunction. And if they don't want to use that, they could use a semicolon. So it will be one independent clause, comma, conjunction, second independent clause. Or one independent clause, semicolon, second independent clause. Let's take a look at some of these. She visited Washington, comma, conjunction. He went to California. Notice that this can stand alone. She visited Washington. So can this. He went to California. But to make it more interesting, they've combined these two sentences using commas and conjunctions so that they can stand and create a compound sentence. Check this one out. Beth and Dave swam in the ocean, but they only played outside until it rained. We've got one independent clause here. Beth and Dave swam in the ocean. Notice it can make sense by itself. Then they added a comma, fanboy. And then they only played outside until it rained. That's another independent clause. So independent clause 1, comma, conjunction, or a semicolon if they wanted to use that. Second independent clause. On It's Learning, you will find these sentences if you want to take an extra look. Let's look at one of these. The pizza was tasty and really gooey. So is this simple or is it compound? So when I look at this, I say, well, first of all, I don't see a comma and conjunction in there. I see a conjunction and, but is it joining two independent clauses? Really good. Gooey. The pizza was tasty. Well, this one makes sense. The pizza was tasty. But really gooey doesn't. So this one's going to be a simple sentence. How about this one up here? Her mom was furious. She grounded her for a whole week. Well, I noticed that semicolon right away, so I'm going to cover that up and read to the left. Her mom was furious. That makes sense. She grounded her for a whole week. That makes sense. And I don't see any clue words in there. This is a compound sentence. Our next kind of sentence, complex sentences. These sentences are going to have one independent clause plus one subordinate clause. So this is a mixture. Let's look at this first example. The monster whose appearance was odd danced with my mom. Just a little hint, you're going to see clue words in these sentences. So for those of you who mastered your adjective clauses with that, which, whose, who, and whom, and your adverb clauses with your white bus, these are going to be pretty easy to find. Notice it has a clue word right there. Whose appearance was odd. That's a subordinate clause, isn't it? I've got a subject, whose, appearance, and a verb, was odd. Now if I cover that up and I read what's left, I now see it was the monster danced with my mom. Well, that does make sense. So I've got one independent there and one subordinate. Let's look at this example. Before I put gel in my hair, I'm going to dye it purple. So when I take a look at this sentence, I don't see any commas and conjunctions, and I don't see semicolons, so I can go ahead and rule out compounds. And then I see this clue word right here, before. Sometimes that can be a preposition, but if it has a subject and a verb, I've got a clause. So before I put gel in my hair is a subordinate right there. So I've got an S. Now if I remove it and read what's left, I have I am going to dye it purple. Well, that makes sense. That can stand alone. has a subject and a verb. That's an independent. So this is an example of a complex sentence because it has one subordinate and it has one independent. So are these compounds or are they complexes? Well, let's look at this one right here. The ghost. Oh, let's look at this one actually. Whenever I jump off a ramp, my skateboard flies out from under me. So whenever I jump off the ramp, there's a clue word right there. So I've got a subordinate clause. I'm going to cover it up and read what's left. My skateboard flies out from under me. That's a complex sentence. I'm going to let you guys try number 2 and number 3. Let's move on. Here's our last kind of sentence. This is probably the most difficult sentence that students could write or even to find. This is going to be a compound sentence, so it will have two independents. Somewhere in it will be a comma, conjunction, or semicolon. But then they sneak in a subordinate clause, making it a CC, compound complex. So let's look at one. The dragon was breathing fire, and he was blowing smoke which stung my eyes. So if I look at this sentence right here, first thing I look for, oh, I see that comma and conjunction in it. So let's cover that up. Read to the left, the dragon was breathing fire. That makes sense. And he was blowing smoke which stung my eyes. Well, that makes sense, but I see a clue word right there, which stung my eyes. There's my verb, so I know it's a clause. So now I've got one independent, and one subordinate. Because it is a compound sentence that they snuck a subordinate clause into, that makes it a compound complex sentence. Again, look for those conjunctions, especially if they're accompanied with a comma. So I'm going to let you guys take a look at the examples on your own on It's Learning at the end of the PowerPoint. But what I do want you guys to do is to go ahead and go to the back table when you come in class tomorrow, and you will see a pink half sheet of paper. That pink half sheet of paper has examples, the formulas, and it has steps that you'll want to take to find these, and that half pink sheet is going to be what you're going to use at your stations on Tuesday. So make sure you pick up the pink steps half piece of paper on the kidney table before Tuesday. I'll also know that you watched this video if you pick up the pink piece of paper. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.